Welcome to Fiction Authors Talk Books, or Fat Books Podcast. This episode, I'm talking with the amazing Shiloh Walker about reviews and conventions with some advice from seasoned authors sprinkled in. I named this podcast Fiction Authors Talk Books because I wanted to incorporate all aspects of being a fiction author in the discussions. Being an author is a stressful job with high expectations from both ourselves and our fans, so this will always be a chill conversation that probably goes off topic most times, but we'll have some fun. If you enjoyed the podcast and would like to see your favorite author on here, send them this link and they can get in touch with us at fatbookspodcast@gmail.com. We take all authors who write fiction and have been published as long as they're polite. Thanks for joining, and on to the podcast. Hi.
Hi,
How are you doing?
I'm doing all right. How are you?
Good. I'm glad we got a chance to do this.
This is my first podcast, so I will let you steer the boat.
All right, so then we'll just jump in. First of all, are you a happily ever after kind of author?
Oh, yes.
Yeah.
And when I write my romances, they always have to have a happy ever after. Now, I have an urban fantasy series under my j.c.daniels name, and even though those have a romance running through them,
Yeah.
they don't, each book does not end with a happy ever after. I mean, for one, it's still an ongoing story, but it's also not a romance. That's why I put a different name on it.
Right.
And those
I
are
gotcha.
different. I mean, the expectations are different with that story, but when it
Oh,
comes
for
to
sure.
romance, I'm one of those authors and I'm one of those readers. It's like stay away from the HEA. If you don't give me that happy ever after when I'm reading you, I will never read you again.
Well, most of my series are all ongoing, so I don't have a happy ever after for like each couple anymore. Mine are more like just the series keep going. However, like yeah, it's normally one character with like a few guys or whatever, but there's romance elements, but it's technically more murder mystery than anything and she works for the FBI, but like I'm big on just not even just happily ever afters on the ending, but like the good guys win in the end. Like, I need that in my fiction. I need that as the author. So, like, they always catch the bad guy. Like, yeah, some people have died, but it's not like the main character or, one of her real love interests kind of thing. Like, I hate that stuff. There's enough crap in real life. If I'm
Yeah.
taking the time and effort, I want to see some happiness more than in my life. Some of the psychological thrillers, I don't know. Sometimes I just think it's like the story didn't know how to finish itself, so they just turn it around and it's like, woohoo, we were being cool the whole time. And it's like,
I think it's harder in the world we live in currently to actually sell a believable happy ever after sometimes because the world is rough right now. A lot of people they're like, how is anybody happy in this day and age? And I mean, well, you can be. I mean, I'm happily married. Not that we haven't had our problems, God knows we have. We've been together for years.
right.
You can still find happiness in this world. You can still find hope. And that's one of the things I like to write about and one of the things I like to give readers and everything. And I know that's not something everybody looks for, but I'm like, if I'm going to be sitting down to read, why in the world do I want to read about everything that's going on out in the world? Why would I want to find that in my fiction, which is what I do to escape?
Yeah, like I've gotten lots of comments of like, do you just get off on terrorizing and tripping up your characters? But it's like, that's just life. I mean, we all have loss, we all have hardships, we've all had some type of bullying and abuse. Be a normal person, whether werewolf or human. I think that's just part of it to appreciate when you get your any glimmer of happiness. But yeah, I'm totally with you that it's a lot to take in and just you can't get away with the romances anymore where it's like the main character it just skirts through everything because she's pretty and has big boobs. Like that doesn't work anymore and I'm glad. Like I'm really glad romances have generally pulled away from there.
No, it's been quite a while before. I mean, you still find those in Harlequins and stuff, and Harlequins suit their purpose, especially if that's your thing, and if you just want something
Disconnect
easy
and oh
to
for
read
sure. I'm
and
I'm talking
everything.
more than
But
yeah, and I've no shade on Harlequin like that. There are times that I'm just like I just want it to be easy. I don't want to think.
yeah,
I just want to just dive in. I totally get that, but that used to be more mainstream.
romance has grown a lot since I came on the scene. I mean,
Oh,
just
for
in the
sure.
and I've been doing it, geez, almost 20 years now. That's
Oh, you got more years than me, but I was even just thinking when I was reading when I was, a baby, and even how far like Nora Roberts books have changed. I
yeah.
used to read Nora Roberts books with my grandma when I was in high school. and we would give them. I would go to the library, we'd give them back and forth, and she'd just always be like, there's some parts in there that you need to skip," and she would flag, like, the dirty parts for me to skip. But even, like, those kind of mainstream books, it's good. I think we've made progress, and it's not so much
Yeah.
like, because I remember being on the L, which is the subway in Chicago, and somebody, like, having a book cover on a Nora Roberts book because she was, I don't know if she didn't want flack of reading romance on the train or something. Now it's not that big of a deal. It's just like, this is what we all do. We all like it. Who cares if, the guys laugh at us sometimes? It's just nice. Like, you know?
Yeah, the genre's come a long way, and I think readers are getting more comfortable about just being comfortable with reading it. And I mean, why not? It's about love, it's about relationships, and it's about sex. And most people are, if they're honest with themselves, those are things most people want in their lives.
Oh,
I
for
mean,
sure.
and maybe not that sex, because there are plenty of people out there who are ace and they're just not into that sexual part. But there are a lot of people out there, they still want the romance part, they still want the love part, they want the connection part.
Yeah.
And
Or even some of the exciting parts in a romance now where it's not
yeah,
just all romance, but yeah, you've got paranormal
yeah.
vampires kicking butt and all that kind of stuff, which I like the combinations. I like that it's branched
Oh,
out into not
there are
everybody in
so
their
many
own lane.
subgenres.
Right. And I have a series that actually somebody was joking around about something. It was in a author chat on Facebook. This is a while ago. And somebody was saying, "Oh yeah, I really like how you combine this, and this in your books for different genres." And a different author jumped in like, "You can't put those three together. That wouldn't really work." And I got snippy because that's my default setting as a Chicagoan. I got snippy and was like, "Well, I've made it work. And, hey, why not throw in a few more?" And then I kind of got to thinking about it. So that's how I have a series that is zombies, apocalyptic, vampires, monarchy. Like there's like 6, 7 different genres in that one book. And it does kind of clash at times. And it's kind of almost 80s horror film cringe where it's not really that scary. But I think that's the fun of it. I think just kind of going, okay, now what if you did this, and this? And completely flipped it on its head. I think that's kind of the whole point of being an author is to make people to push those lines and limits of what they think of romance or this and this is.
When it comes to world building, and that's basically what you're doing with everything when you mash different genres and stuff together. When it comes to world building, what you got to do, create your world, understand what your rules are, even if nobody else does, stick to them, and make sure you understand why they exist and what they're there for, and you can make it work.
Exactly. Yeah.
And honestly, you can make it work. I want to understand the medicine and the biology behind things. It comes from
Mhm.
my years in nursing and everything. If I don't understand the medical reasons behind why somebody might be a werewolf, it's usually with mine, it's not going to be magic or a curse. It's going to be something like a virus
Right.
or something genetically created. So I need to understand the why and the wherefore and the hows while I'm creating my world. And as long as I understand those and I stick to those, whatever
Yeah.
I'm adding to the world, you can make things work. Nobody can tell you, they don't have to understand how you're doing it. As long as you understand it, you can bring that to the reader while you're writing it so they can understand it. So nobody can tell you it will or it won't work.
Right. No, I totally agree. And it's funny that you say that because I have a couple different books or series where the answer is there is no answer. And I think as long as you explain certain things as the author, like not to get political, and we don't want that here, but look how many different answers people have for the same topic of what happened as the events. And I think, like, for instance, the apocalypse one, like the answer will be nobody has the freaking answer. The main character says in one put, "I've asked 7 people and I got 11 different answers as to what happened and what started this all." I mean, even hurricanes that have happened and people are like, "Oh no, it hit here and here first," and then like 2 days later they're like, "No, and we had this many deaths." Like you never get the same answers for stuff. And I think if it's like a global calamity kind of thing, you're not going to get the same answers. But as long as you explain that as the author, like she wasn't in the government, she didn't do any of this stuff. I don't know, but that's how I see it, and I've explained that as that's kind of my view.
And as long as there's a rational reason, like global calamity, that
Right.
makes sense. I
Right.
mean, that's not gonna make sense necessarily in a small town setting, like, say there was a fire in a barn and all of a sudden the entire world's in a an apocalypse. That
Yeah.
wouldn't make sense, but in the situation and the parameters that you've given, it makes sense, it works. So,
Right.
I mean, again, it's creating your world, creating your rules, knowing why those rules are there,
Sticking to
and
them.
sticking to them. That's how you make it work. That's how you sell it to readers and get them to understand it and believe it. I mean, that if you don't understand it, if you don't believe it, if it doesn't work for you, if you can't sell it to yourself, how are you going to sell it to anybody else?
Exactly. How are you going to make them invested in the characters in the world if you don't know what's going on? And I've not even to pick on other authors because it's not easy and we all mess up. But like I've read certain books where I'm like, it's book 8 and I just want to go, "Have you read the first 3 books of your own series?" Like, did you take any notes? Maybe reread them? So as much as people give me like I've had some, not a lot, but I've had some people be like, that's overkill that you reread every book before you write the next one in the series. Well, it's getting harder now that some of my series are full novels, book 17, or I'm working on 18 and I had to read all 17 again. But to me, if you switch between series or you don't do just like a trilogy all at once, you have to re-immerse yourself, or how are you going to expect a reader to want to be immersed in that world?
Well, yeah,
Because
yeah.
like
I mean,
I've
I skim, especially if it's been a while.
right. Yeah, like I skip over most of the sex scenes because I wrote them. I literally know what happens. But like, yeah, the conflicts and that kind of detailed stuff. But now I'm kind of thinking I'm switching to like I read the last 2 books before starting 18, and then now while I'm writing 18, I'm going back and rereading 1 through 15, skimming at night kind of thing. Yeah, to get my mind back in it, make sure I've because I mean I have like a running list of like open plot lines in any series. I have tons of different notes, but just you always miss one. There's always something that you wanted to revisit, and I think that's important because
Yeah,
the worst criticism I could ever have somebody say about one of my series is have you read the first books of your series because this doesn't track. And it'd be like, oh. But
yeah, I understand.
there's so much research that I think that good authors I was living in Wyoming for a while years and years ago. And I was reading a book, and the author was like, yeah, it took like 2 hours to fly to Casper's International Airport. I'm like, one, Casper, Wyoming ain't got a freaking international airport. So maybe pull up Google on the city you're writing about. And two, there's no way you're flying from New York to Casper, Wyoming in 2 freaking hours. Is that a jet, a military jet? Maybe like stuff like that is just right is embarrassing for all of us as authors. Like, oh,
I'm thinking it's like 90 minutes, I think, from New York to, or it's 90 minutes from where I am up to like Chicago, or 2 hours. No, that's just not.
yeah, yeah. I mean, even if by the
Maybe
time you get
Captain Marvel was flying them.
yeah, right. Maverick, the new Maverick movie was the jet. But yeah, I don't even know what the flight time from Boston to I think I flew when I was in Colorado. So I flew out of Denver and I flew to Boston when my sister got married. And I think that flight was 4.5, 5 hours. So that's a comparable from like kind of New York to Wyoming, east to west
Yeah.
wise at least.
I
Maybe
mean,
more
it's
north south.
it's more than half the country.
Yeah. And
Way
she's
more
like,
than
"Oh yeah,
half
it was
the
the flight was
country.
under 2 hours." No shade if she wants to make that flight and like maybe she got like a new private jet kind of supersonic coolio thing, but like you gotta explain that. You can't, that's lazy writing and makes us all look bad if you don't at least look that up.
Yeah, and what's the point? And you don't even have to be specific about the time of
Right,
flight.
like why put it in if you're gonna put
It
it
was
in
a
wrong?
few hours. It was a few hours. I mean, some of the best advice I ever got, it was when I was working on one of my books. I had a couple of military characters, and I'm comfortable writing some things with military in them just because of acquaintances I have and stuff, and they're willing to talk to me and give me some information. But
Right,
one of the pieces of advice somebody had given me when I was working on the book, she was like, "People don't want to know how the clock works. They just want to know that it works." So you go
right,
with broad strokes.
right.
When you
Or
break things down to the nitty-gritty, that's where you screw up. Like 2
exactly.
hours to fly to from New York City to Wyoming.
Exactly.
That was a nitty-gritty detail. If she had just said a few hours, nobody would think twice.
Right. No, I
So,
completely agree. Or sometimes, like I was saying earlier, sometimes the answer is you don't have the answer. Even if you're in the military, you don't know all the other aspects about different divisions or groups or, branches. You don't know all that stuff. So the character wouldn't either. And, sometimes it's nice to gloss it over, but sometimes it is, like you were saying earlier about getting into the nitty gritty. With my murder mystery, they were dying in Lake Michigan. And so they were bodies waterlogged and everything. So I actually got in contact with a medical
Plumber.
examiner in the UK that specialized on like water body retrieval and how to autopsy that. And I'm not kidding you, I could not eat for like 2 days after talking with them. It
Yeah.
was fascinating, and I'm normally fine about stuff. It was super gross, but it was completely fascinating. And I liked getting those kind of nitty-gritty details
Yeah,
and working it in.
disgusting topic, but those kind of discussions can bring a whole lot of realism to your work.
Oh, for sure. But it doesn't have to be everything, you know?
No.
And I think it's important that you kind of just handle what you can handle. When I was a newer author, a lot of times I took on like too much and then it got complicated and then you can't necessarily always walk it back. But like you were saying, just get the basics down and every book you're adding a layer, you're adding a new facet to what you've already built.
Right. It's those broad strokes and then you fill in details as you go bit by bit by bit, but it's the right kind of details that you add in. You don't want to start out to trying to make a Picasso and then you turn it into a kindergarten
Paint by numbers. Yeah.
paint by numbers because you went a little overboard.
Right. It's also funny because, like you were saying about the world building, in one of my series, super early, I mentioned, and there was an interaction with demons. And I kind of had only brushed up against it like a couple times, but I haven't gotten there. I've gotten a lot of feedback like, she forgot about the demons. And I've flat out said, no, I didn't. But I've seen authors be criticized because, like, towards the end or the completion of the series, they like all of a sudden demons were real and they're like, oh, they ran out of topics. And so I wanted to like counter that criticism by bringing them in early and we're going to get to them later, but they're there in the world. So don't accuse me of lazy writing later. Well, I mean, you've got to sidestep a
Yeah.
lot of that stuff as an
Yeah.
author, and it's really hard.
I try not to worry about the criticism other authors get. If I do that, I'll get so neurotic because
Oh, for sure.
I just do it and go, and if it feels right, it feels right, and if it doesn't, it doesn't. But I see where you're coming from, you know?
The easier stuff where you just throw it in earlier and get to it later. Like it kind of drives me nuts when other authors are like, I read every review and I take it to heart and I fix it for I work on it to the next book. And it's like, no, you don't. Don't lie to people. No, you do not. Because you can't.
No.
I could get 10 reviews and 5 say they don't like how much sex there is and the other 5 will say they want more sex. You cannot do that to both parties. And I'm not even
No.
picking on fans and reviewers. We all have our different opinions. That's what makes it fun. But like don't
Please
tell them
everybody.
exactly. And hell, you can't even please anybody sometimes, but
No,
you do your
you can't
best.
please everybody.
Right.
When it comes to reviews and everything, one thing authors don't seem to understand, and not all authors, it's authors who freak out about reviews. Every single one of them have read or seen or consumed something they did not like. And they've talked about it, they've shared it with somebody.
Yeah.
And when they get offended that a reader didn't like their book, they are doing exactly what somebody
They're a
else would just,
hypocrite.
yeah, it's
Yeah.
hypocritical. I mean,
Yeah.
unless they have loved every single thing they have ever consumed, or they've been quiet about everything they didn't love, they have no right to criticize somebody else for their opinion, because that's what it is. It is that one person's opinion, and they are entitled to it. It
Yeah.
doesn't matter what they say, it doesn't matter how much they hated that book, as long as the focus is on the book and not a personal attack on the person where they're threatening them or something because they hated the book.
Yeah.
They can hate that book, they can be as vitriolic about it as they want. They are entitled to their opinion on that book. It
Well,
may hurt, and if it does, stop reading your reviews.
Well, I've had to do
But
that because yeah, people aren't
yeah,
necessarily fair. But, like, I get what you're saying if they don't like the book. That's fair.
yeah,
If you don't like my books, I understand. Quit
yeah.
reading them and go find an author that makes you happy. But there are a lot of reviews that they thrive on hating the books. So, like, I have a series that the same person has read all 17 books and tears into them.
Here's my response on that. Nora Roberts has had somebody attend one of her book signings, and a Nora Roberts book signing is a zoo. I've been invited to a couple of them before, so when I say it's a zoo,
I
I
believe you.
mean it's a zoo. You have to get tickets, you wait in line, it's hours long events and everything.
Oh,
And
wow.
we were talking at one point, and she said she had had a reader come up to her and say, "I've read every single one of your books, and I've hated all of them." That's a lot of commitment. I mean, and it may not have been every single one. I'm just kind of paraphrasing here, so
Yeah,
don't
oh, for
take that
sure.
to heart or anything, but there's
Yeah.
a thin line between love and hate. So if somebody's going to invest that much time
Yeah.
and money,
That's true, like a guilty pleasure
yeah,
by then or something
yeah,
that they don't
then
wanna
let
like
them
it,
have
but they keep coming back.
right. Let them
No,
have it. It's a bizarre, weird obsession, but those kind of obsessions, they attract attention, and I can guarantee whoever this person is that's hated every single one of your books, people have picked up books because of those reviews. I can guarantee it. I mean, that's just the
that's
nature of the
that's
beast.
that is a very adult perspective of it, and sometimes I'm kinda childish in that. Again, if they didn't like it, that's fine, but you can do it respectfully. Like, I don't come into their work and just berate them.
Yeah.
That's
Well,
kinda my line. I had somebody that, gave, like, a one-star review, and it was probably, like, a full printed page rant of a review, and the whole time she's like, "The rape in here, yada da da da, da 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 da," and I'm like, "Wait, I'm sorry, what book did you read? There was no rape. Like, don't accuse me of stuff that isn't even in the book." So, like, that kinda stuff is it
yeah.
gets under my skin, and that's why I'm not allowed to read my reviews.
This is how I know that the negative reviews, like the 17 book rant type, make readers buy books. I've bought books based on those kind of reviews.
Oh, get
And I'm not the
out.
only person like me.
Oh, no, for
So
sure
I
you're
know
not.
it happens. I mean, yeah, I've totally bought books because of that. And I mean, I've had reviewers leave posts. Well, the story was good, but there was so much sex. In romance, something like that's almost like a one
That's
click
like a
call.
seal of approval.
They're
Yeah.
like, oh, click, click, click. They can be hard to read and everything, but you just got to remember to disconnect from them. And
Yeah, those
but
kind of
this
reviews
person,
I'm fine with. Even if they're like I had
but
a review recently that was like, "She's so immature. I'm tired of her being like or I hate characters like this." And she wasn't wrong for that part of the criticism, but it's kind of like and so I don't get offended on that kind of stuff because it's like, well, yeah, she's supposed to grow. How do I have her grow if she starts perfect? So like again,
right,
those kind of reviews, that kind of stuff doesn't bug me, but it's like some of the other yeah, like or like I've gotten a lot of stuff about like, "Oh, that's not how you respond to PTSD situations." And it's like, that's the whole point. Not everybody like, so those are the ones that I'm like, "Grr," but I'm not again, I'm not mad as long as it's not like flat out lies like, "Oh, she's glorifying rape," or the rape in the book. I'm like, "There was no rape. What are you talking about?" But yeah, otherwise, I
well,
I understand not everybody's gonna like
yeah.
what you put out.
You gotta consider, some people's filter, especially and we don't know what their particular traumas are. If there's
Exactly.
something right, that's one thing you've also gotta consider, since we don't know people's backgrounds and everything. I mean, yeah, it sucks, but the best thing to do is just consider that they've got a filter that we don't know about. So something that they read, they're gonna be seeing it through that filter, and the best we can do is just disconnect and let it go. I mean, it
Yeah.
sucks, but stewing over it doesn't do you any good, and it doesn't fix anything. And
No, for sure, and that
it's
is a
taken
really
me
good point
years.
about that she saw it something else to I didn't consider that. I kind of because I had a lot of that, especially early in my career, where other authors would just write crap reviews to kinda try and tank the newbie or,
Yeah,
didn't like something I said, so then they whatever.
yeah.
So I
I
just
mean,
kinda always that's a good point though about, like, her seeing it through a different lens. I kind of just assume it was somebody trolling me and being a jerk. But
yeah, and keep in mind, I've been doing this a long time, and I'm speaking from some experience that I've had with reviews and everything, but I'm also speaking just from, like, people that I've been around and discussions I've had. We all bring our own filters into things that we watch, things that we read, things that we consume, discussions we have,
oh, for
and without
sure.
knowing another person's experiences, we can't really understand all that's going into it.
Oh,
So
for sure. I mean, and in any situation, there's your version, my version, and then the actual truth. It's
right.
just how we see the world and what things, influence us. And the last editor I worked with, she would always be like, "You don't know who cut them off in traffic. You don't know who hit them with a grocery cart in the store, and then they read your book through not having a good day lenses." Like, so yeah, all of that is completely fair. For my anxieties, it's better if because I like one of my
Oh,
last books,
yeah.
I think I had 1,000 reviews all of them 3 stars and above, and 1 one-star review. That is immediately the one I clicked on, and that was the only one I read. So, it's just better for everyone in my world if I don't look. I appreciate them. I thank my fans all the time for leaving reviews. Yeah,
Trust me, I understand. It's easier for me to disconnect and be professional when it comes to things online. Now, me in real life,
yeah,
like, if somebody ticks me off in traffic, or if they get in my face in a store, or if they say something to one of my kids, anything like that, it's like, buddy, you're taking your life into your own hands. It's different in real life, but when it comes to things online and everything, and a lot of it happens just because I have to type it out. And then I look
right.
back and I'm like, do I really want to say that?
Oh,
And then I do
yeah.
it
I've
again,
I've done that a
and then
few
I do it
times, and
again.
when you're a
So,
newbie, we all fall into that trap when we're a newbie, like, trying to defend ourselves.
yeah, and when it comes to your books and everything, if you've done the best that you can with the book, then there's nothing to defend, it stands on its own. In fact, you've got people reading it, you've got people loving it, and more of them love it and want more than those who hate it. That's enough of the defense as it is. You will never please everybody, but as
Yeah.
long as more people love it than hate it, then you're okay. Now, if there's somebody out there that more people hate it than love it, then maybe you should see what the problem is.
Yeah.
Yeah,
As long as the
that's,
general consensus is it's happy, happy. I actually started a Discord server recently, and if people say something, I don't argue with it as long as it's, respectful and quote unquote my house of the Discord. But I've had a lot of people that I've just one-on-one responded to, like not defending, but explaining, like, well, she grew up this way, and it's kind of a hard page to turn. And like, so not like I'm not defending them or getting defensive. I think it's kind of, if I was the reader, I would think that's kind of cool that the author just was like, "Hey, you know what? Here's a little bit more background. Like get into her head. Let's take a minute." And it's so people have responded to that. I think it's kind of fun. Just like every so often I go in there, pick out a comment or something, and like, I always saw it like ba 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 ba. So yeah, like that kind of stuff I love. I could do that all day long. I mean, hi, I
oh,
love you
readers love getting inside the head. Those looks behind the curtain and stuff, they love those.
for sure. I wanted to ask, you went to one Nora Roberts signing? Have you been to any other?
No, I've been t Nora's had me at her store. Well, the first time I went out there, I was invited to speak at the Washington Area Romance Writers event, and their signing was hosted by her store, so she was at that one. I think I've been to 3 signings there, and then a girls'
Oh,
night out
nice.
there, possibly 4.
Oh, fun.
3 or 4, I can't remember the exact number. It's fun. Her assistant, Laura, she teases me on it, but the first time especially, I was so intimidated. I mean, I couldn't even speak, and then she complimented me on a necklace that I was wearing, and I was like, and the funny thing was the necklace was my mom's. I needed something to wear with the dress, and, I'm more into darker stuff. Not quite goth, but just almost that sort of vibe, and I
Yeah,
wanted something a little bit not quite dressy, but, more mainstream, and so
right.
I saw that necklace on my mom's, and so I called her
Traditional
later that
colors.
night. Yeah, and I was like, "Hey, mom, I'm keeping your necklace," and she's like, "What?" And she's like, "Nora Roberts liked your necklace," and she complimented it, and so it's mine now. It's my good luck token. You can't have it back, and I'm telling everybody that she liked it, and you might as well just give it to me because 'cause I'm stealing it. And she just laughed. I've got a blog on it and everything, but, yeah, it's my Nora Roberts necklace. I mean, I can literally see it hanging on my, I've got a jewelry rack hanging in my bathroom by the mirror where all my necklaces are, and I can see it right now just looking at it, and every time I see it, I'm like, "Oh, that's my Nora Roberts necklace." And
Oh,
my
I
mom
love
just
it.
laughed at me, and she was like, "Okay, you can have it. I guess I'll let you have it."
I actually have the pen somewhere. I have it like wrapped and saved away, but I have the pen that I gave Anne Rice to use to sign one of the books when I met her. She was the headliner at a conference I was at as the author. So she came a little bit early and was actually really super nice. And so the authors could all get signatures, like autographs from her before we had to deal with our own fans. Deal with, that sounded mean, but you know what I mean. So yeah, she was super nice, and it was in Chicago. I brought my 90-year-old grandma, 80-something-year-old grandma with me, and just to kind of see, she was coming for the event with my mom. And so she got to meet Anne Rice, and she was like, "Oh, so you work with Aaron?" And I'm like, "Oh dear God, she just said that to Anne Rice. Like we're colleagues sitting at the same cubicle area." And Anne Rice was super nice about it. She's like, "Yeah, your granddaughter's in the same profession." I'm just like, Anne Rice just called me a colleague. But yeah, she was super nice and really normal. She was there with security. And oh, J.R. Ward was there, and she is a doll. She is such a sweetheart. She's honestly one of the nicest authors I've ever met. And you wouldn't think that she's some huge name. She's just, "Hey, what's up?" And you're just like, "Hi."
Yeah, I've met JR several times.
She was there too with security, and you're like, God, I want to be cool enough. I was pretty newbie then, and I just remember thinking, I want to be cool enough to need security at a signing. Like, I don't know, that just is like the line. I think that you made it, not thinking about why she would need security, just more in my newbie mind, like that's the level you want to get to.
I
uh,
don't know if I want to need security.
I've had several death threats, so honestly, I would just bring a large looking friend that could play bodyguard at this point.
Yeah.
Uh, yeah, especially the group sightings, they're just so crazy.
Yeah, group signings are madness. There
Yeah,
was one I was planning on going on to this year that would it's their last one and it's one that I've attended regularly, but this year it's just been I had COVID back in 2020 and just recovering
me
from it
too.
it's been hell. This year
Yeah,
I'm finally starting to feel a little bit better, but I didn't have it in me to try. So I'm going to miss their last one, but the big signings are a lot of fun, but my goodness, they can be chaos.
yeah,
Uh
I have some social anxiety, so they weren't so much fun for me. I mean, it was great to get to talk to some readers one on one, but then there were just the people who didn't understand why it wasn't okay touching strangers to take pictures, or stuff like that, where it's like five different people who just wanted every author to sign their book so they could sell it on eBay, and I'm like, no, move along.
They're not for everybody, especially if you've got issues with social anxiety or being in public and everything. Those they can be a problem. Sometimes starting out with smaller ones.
Yeah, I was fine with like doing the lectures and talking in front of people. But it's like once it's the signing, people just touch you and take pictures and don't ask if it's okay. And
Um,
that's kind of
yeah.
my area of like, please don't touch me.
I've always been very vocal about being big on privacy and needing my space. So it's easier for me, or maybe it's
Yeah.
just part of my persona.
Yeah.
People won't touch me without asking. So I can circumnavigate that. But I
Yeah.
think that, well, one, I have an excellent resting bitch face, even when I'm not trying to. So
Yeah, me
people are
too.
pretty good about not invading my personal space, but I also don't come out from behind my table without somebody asking, so
Yeah, I had
and,
people who were just like moving around the table. I'm talking to somebody and somebody else just moved around the table and hugged me. And I'm like, who are you and why are
Mhm.
you touching me? Honestly, I would do more lectures if it wasn't all about recording everything in cameras because I don't show my face anymore. Not after I had a stalker thing. Like, I don't show my
Oh,
face. I don't want pictures. I don't want any of it. So it's like,
I understand that.
yeah, it
Um,
sucks, but I got to do what's best to protect myself because I
Me
can't
living in a
afford
small town and
security.
everything is part of why, I don't do a lot of pictures and video
Yeah.
type stuff. I'm private, and I want to be the one who decides where my face goes and where my face doesn't go.
No, I totally agree. I want to give a big thanks to Shiloh Walker for joining me for such a fun conversation. Also, to all of our fans for checking this podcast out. I hope you liked what you heard and decide to stick around. Please make sure to subscribe to the Fat Books podcast on YouTube or Spotify or that little purple icon on your Apple device. Follow us on Twitter and Facebook to stay up to date on who we're recording with and when episodes are coming out. There's also a Patreon if you want to support the podcast and keep it going. Now let's hear a bit about what Shiloh's working on and what to look forward to from her next.
Well, my next big book coming out is the next book in my j.c.Daniels series, Blooded Blade, which is I've been keeping readers waiting on that one for like 5 years. So I'm excited about that. I'm starting to get some early feedback on it, and so far it looks like it's going over well. I'll be honest, I'm kind of nervous about this one. My urban fantasy series, it's always been a little bit darker than my other books. I couldn't write it for like 5 years. In 2017, I lost my brother to suicide, and I went into a really bad depression afterward. Going into her head was hard, and for a while, I mean, for almost 2 years, the only kind of writing I did was freelance writing. But the depression eased up and I was able to start writing for me again. But it took me longer to be able to step back into Kit's head. Earlier this year, the story just kind of dropped on me like a beast, and I was able to tear through it once the ideas started flowing easy. And I thought it was going to be the last book in the series, which did not please my readers, but there's going to be one more after it. I'm really excited about it. Again, that one's called Blooded Blade. Other than that one, it's called A Dragon's Desire. It's a paranormal series. It's the second in the series. It's sort of not quite post apocalyptic, but it's an alternate type of world from ours. Shapeshifters exist, Fae exists, and there was a war. It lasted for 10 years. It decimated the world. I mean, millions upon millions died, and it happened because of group of humans decided they did not want to live with people who weren't human. So bigotry and prejudice played a lot into it. The paranormal, they're called preterns. The preterns, they refer to the war as the slaughters. The entire war started because a homegrown militia down, I think it was Mississippi, they went and they slaughtered an entire band of shape-shifting ponies who were traveling up through Mexico. And they slaughtered all of them, from the youngest child up to the oldest elder. And alpha of a predatory cat pack went after the militia and killed them. And the bigoted type of humans, they decided they wanted his head. And the war broke out shortly after that. So the first book, the timeline seems a little bit different if you're not me, which is everybody else who's read it but me. But the first book is set in the main timeline of the world, and that one's called A Prime's Passion, and it's rejected mates, reunited lovers type of story. The second one in the series, which is the most recent, is A Dragon's Desire. They can all be read standalone, and that one is a dragon shapeshifter. I love him. He is an arrogant piece of work, and him and the heroine met back in the 1500s. He did not understand what she was, and because he didn't understand what she was, he did something that actually killed her. And she's reincarnated right at the start of the wars, and he recognizes her almost right off the bat. He didn't think she had ever come back, so he's just been lonely and maudlin since then. He's out flying one night in the new territory that he's claimed. He feels something. He recognizes that it's something new and it's calling to him, so he flies down to investigate. He takes one look at her and he's like, oh, and that's kind of where the bulk of the story starts. There's some of the backstory and everything, but I love the story. I had so much fun. So that and Blooded Blade are my most recent release and the one that's coming out next.
Thanks for staying until the end and hope you enjoyed it.